So the first topic, main topic we will be discussing is artificial intelligence. What is it, and what is it? How is it? How can it be used? So I first want to kind of ask the room about your familiarity with AI, like how, on a spectrum from novice but interested to all the way in and read about it every day. Like, where are you? How much do you understand? New information comes out every day. So where are you on the spectrum of familiarity with AI? So I don't know. You can jump in. I don't want to call on people. That feels like a teacher.
So for me, I actually have approached AI the same way that I approached open educational resources. Like at first it seemed like this really big, complex, like vast thing. And then I stepped back and realized how much artificial intelligence I already use. And so that made it less scary because I know that there are automatic things I do, like automatic bill pay in my personal life that takes the worry and stress out of whether or not I'm going to pay my bills on time. Thinking about the automations that are within the software that I use every day, working with faculty and staff, working with students, like we have auto comps that go out. There are automated actions that happen within our systems when certain data or triggers are pulled. And so that led me to starting to experiment with things like ChatGPT, Bing, and it made it less scary. So I think for me, my experience has been not necessarily running towards it, but like picking it up as I go along to make life easier.
Okay. Anybody else
So,
want to?
yeah, I want to jump in where Katie left off on the not running towards it, as a full tilt running towards stuff like this kind of a person. And I will say that is certainly not without caution that I'm sure we'll get into at some point. But in terms of getting excited about new technologies, that's just who I've always been. And I am always ready to try a new innovation, especially when it comes to stuff like this, because I think it's cool. I think I read one too many sci-fi books and watched one too many sci-fi movies. It's not a thing, you can't actually do that, when I was little. And I just think the idea of being able to have automations work with us, work alongside us, and help co-create this world that we're in is fascinating. It's fascinating to get in and dig into the guts and be able to program things. And whether that's on a level like, I try not to say her name around here, but like my Echo, that, I have programmed out with also things like I have a home assistant on like a Raspberry Pi to do automations around my home to make my life easier. My husband is a big old plant guy. That was his pandemic thing. And we got automated wands for our blinds that we could set up on with our home assistant and with our Echo that open the blinds at a certain time and close them at a certain time every day. So I'm not worrying about the plants getting light. And I don't have to be the one sitting there turning every single window. And something simple, right? Because I was, something simple like that makes my life that much easier. And I think it's important for us to think about AI in terms of those types of things. I think there's a lot of scary information about what AI could be in ways that seem to maybe take away from humanity. And I think that it's important to remember that there are all these pieces that can increase what humanity has, what people have, and what people can do. And, not all of our early shots at this have been great. Like for those of us who remember Clippy, like I think that, not every shot at an early AI helper has been wonderful, but I'm excited to see that we're at a point where it seems possible to integrate these things in a way that is useful and worthwhile and productive. So I do read about AI every day. I use it just about every day. There are plenty of things I'm cautious about. I really do want to state that, but I get excited. And that's really where I am with AI.
Anyone else?
I can follow up with that because I am also incredibly excited about it. I am not nearly as knowledgeable, versed in AI as some of the people on this call. So I'll put myself more towards the novice end of things. But it's incredibly exciting to see the possible shifts in teaching and learning. And, you know, in the past with education, it was the educator held all the information and passed it on. And now we have moved, you know, we've been moving past that anyway. But I see AI is going to change the face of teaching and learning, how we teach, what we teach, the skills we're teaching. And so it opens up all kinds of possibilities for us to use our mental energy on higher order things rather than some of those lower order things. I'm super excited about it. I have a healthy, small amount of fear is the wrong word, but skepticism. I don't think it's going to solve everything. I think there's always going to be the need for people in any equation. But I am excited to see where it brings us in the future.
Well, I'll jump in there. I'm also excited about it. I would say that I'm pretty familiar with it. I'm not a programmer by any means. I don't know the sort of technical side of it, but as far as the applications, I follow that every day. You know, I've got my daily newsletter, and I guess I'm a bit of a proselytizer. I probably talked to too many people about it. They're like, "There's that crazy Frank talking about AI again." At first, I was definitely, I would say, kind of overwhelmed by the hype around it. You know, it's kind of hard to not be concerned when you have major people in the field, you know, being cautious about its development and demanding regulation and so on and so forth. I do like Katie, I do, you know, understand that we've been living with it for a long time, or at least previous older versions of it, automations and so on. I mean, I guess automations go back to the Industrial Revolution, right? So it's a matter of it's a technology that's evolving. It didn't just drop in our lap. But I do think that this latest version, because of these large language models, has the ability to interact with us in a more human-like way, and that's what's freaky about it, I think. I mean, when it's, you know, when people are using it as a replacement for going to therapy, for instance, you know, you talk to this AI bot, or suicide prevention hotlines using it. I mean, that's another level. So there's something eerily human about it, but also kind of futuristic about it, you know, in ways that we've been dreaming of AI's potential for so long. And so at this point, I'm more excited than concerned, and hopeful for what it can do, especially in the higher education space, to help our students.
Okay, that's a nice pivot to the next thing I want to sort of have everyone discuss and give their thoughts on. What about our students? You know, there are mixed reports on, you know, how familiar our students are with AI, how much they're using it. You know, in the beginning, especially when ChatGPT kind of splashed onto the scene, even though that is one instance of AI, that's the thing everyone was talking about. And it was, oh, all the students are using it to cheat. And this is just completely disrupting everything we know about teaching and learning and what our students are doing. And then, you know, as the months progressed, and even recently, you know, the research has been coming out around, there is not necessarily a large number of people actively using specifically tools like ChatGPT, that there are some students are using it, some students aren't, that perhaps maybe there wasn't this mass push or sort of mass movement toward using all of these tools, especially in nefarious ways, as all of these articles were sort of intimating about our students, that some students were actually quite concerned about their own privacy and the information that they were putting in. And, I think that is sort of indicative of some of our students now who definitely had have privacy concerns in the ways that when I had a student and was just using the internet in college, didn't. I was just putting everything in. Like I didn't think about privacy and data and all of that. But a lot of the students that we have now, even if they weren't necessarily raised in that culture, most definitely in the past like 3 years with all of these conversations around data privacy and data ethics and congressional hearings about social media and the internet, like you can't get away from it even if you want to. And we're even reinforcing that in some of our course design. I mean, if you think about what is considered best practices in course design, now you are linking to every privacy statement. You are linking to every data policy. In the past, it was, if you knew it was safe, you used it. Now you have to explicitly show evidence that the students are protected, which is not a bad thing, but that also can signal in some ways that yes, these new technologies aren't necessarily good. And then when you like sort of think about the social discourse around what is good on the internet versus what is bad on the internet, which is often very polarized, but still these are the conversations that our students are sort of participating in, or if not participating, are exposed to. That can definitely change the tenor of how fast people are adopting things and are they actually using them. So in your worlds and perhaps with the students that you're interacting with, or the students on your campus, do you think, that some people are like the fall is going to be an AI apocalypse? Are we just going to be like fighting for our lives, trying to wade through not only like the influx of all the tools, but how students are using them? And are we just going to be cranking out policies to try to constrict and constrain? I want to sort of think about this to the best of our abilities from the perspective of a student, because oftentimes we think about it from our perspective, but they're the ones essentially that we're doing all this work for. So from that perspective, what are your thoughts on AI and students specifically?
So I think a few interesting things have come up through conversations that I've had around this, many with professors at the University of New Orleans who are concerned about what their students are doing. And then a lot of stuff that, like I said, I'm very involved in trying to keep up with this kind of stuff. So I'm on a lot of like AI TikTok, which I imagine is the type of stuff that students are seeing, right? Like if I'm guessing, speaking of data privacy, I know, but that's where I am. And I think that's such an interesting juxtaposition of what people are sort of afraid of and the ways that students are actually seeing this and using this. I don't think that it's like every student knows how to do this right now, but I do think that it's the type of thing that every student will know how to do at some point. And maybe it isn't that fall is the AI apocalypse and suddenly no student has ever written a thing on their own and no one writes their own words. But maybe it is more of a thing, showing our exact ages here, when you started hearing about the way that websites could do things, or the way that you could research using hyperlinks and being able to, think about things that way. There are plenty of people who were still in the library with a card catalog, right? And not everything was available, and not the tools weren't maybe quite as good, but eventually that's where it got. And whatever it is that people were trying to put into place for policy to either restrict or help was never going to keep up with the innovations that people who are using the thing are doing. And I feel like that's always the important thing to remember, is by the time we being like, I don't know, old people, administrators, faculty, whatever, are able to catch up or think about what it is that people are doing with this and how they're using it in a way that then bureaucratic processes could happen and we could write a policy, we could put something together. Students have thought of a way to use it differently, which I guess is why I bring up the TikTok thing, because there's so many interesting ways that students are using this or things that I wouldn't have heard of otherwise. And it's not just I put my paper into ChatGPT, it's I put the prompt into ChatGPT and then I did, whether they know the words prompt engineering or not, I did these basic prompt engineering skills and I got this, and then I ran it through something else and I got these words, and then it made me think about another thing, and I put, and they're integrated and using it in ways that I think the types of professors who I've seen who are afraid rather than interested in how to get this into their curriculum are the types of people who would never be able to understand what those pieces are. And I think that there will be at some point, assuming that we continue sort of on this track, a decoupling of critical thinking from writing skill. And right now, the way that our brains tend to work, the way that we have all been trained, is that this process, right? Like your brain to your hand, this process. And that's how that works. What if writing isn't the expression of critical thinking or critical analysis? What if understanding what to prompt is? What if understanding how to read what comes out of the prompt is? I think that there's a new horizon here for how we can think about thinking in a way that is really exciting, really interesting, and will be really helpful for our students in the future. If this is the type of stuff that jobs are going to be using, that society is going to be using, even if it isn't a job, even if it's just like how you write an itinerary for a trip with your friends to the beach, any of those types of things, that's how our students are going to be using it. They're not necessarily going to have critical thinking coupled to the act of writing in that way. And I think that's the space that we need to be digging into in a way that seems much more productive than policing how our students use this.
So I want to say something that kind of piggybacks on that about how students are going to be using it and, them having to learn the skills of prompt engineering. I have a concern that this is going to make the digital divide worse, that there are going to be the students who learn how to correctly use AI and they're going to be more successful. And then there are going to be those who aren't exposed to it, especially right now in early times, and they're losing out on learning those skills that their peers are, starting to harness and grow in. So that's my main concern, but I also see the flip side of that, where AI can be an equaler, where somebody who comes from a less advantageous background, it kind of levels the playing field and it can get them up to the same levels of, production of content or whatever you're assessing. It can get them equal with their peers if they learn how to use it. So I think it's going to be like an issue of exposure and teaching them how to correctly do it. So I started talking to my students about ChatGPT in spring, and most of my kids are freshmen, a few sophomore, but very few of them had even heard of it. And so I encouraged them to get on and start playing with it. And we talked about the things you could do and how, you could get different output from it depending on what you put in. And I think it's going to be up to the educators to expose the students to this so that then they can run with it on their own and figure out what works best and how it works best for them, for their needs. So my concern is the digital divide, but I see how this might actually help it in some ways. But those who do not have technology at all are going to get even farther left behind because of this.
It's a really good point, Whitney. It kind of makes me think about like our college experience. So I think that like most of us on this call are kind of like heading towards middle age. And it's kind of crazy to sort of think about how back when we were in college, it was really the start of technology being not just like this fancy thing that you had access to in a computer lab that was located in the middle of your campus, but this thing that you could carry around with you. And so our college experience, at least my own, I had to turn in typed papers. Like there wasn't anything handwritten. And honestly, I can remember getting a blue book in my last semester of my senior year and thinking to myself, what is this craziness? How am I supposed to write down all the thoughts in my head? Like my hand can't move that fast. And so I think that the students that we have are going to embrace this, and they're going to, I mean, like it's been so prevalent, and the evolution of it has been, you know, years and years of building, that this isn't going to be something weird. It's not going to be something that they're necessarily intimidated by. And that even if they don't have the financial or geographic means to have access readily to technology, I think even when they get their hands on it, they're going to have more of an idea of where to go with it and how to use it. So I honestly am kind of terrified of like policing it and like creating these constricting policies around it, because I think we don't quite know what it is or how it could be helpful or beneficial at this point in time. And so I'm hopeful that we're going to like experiment, that we're going to see how it goes, that we're going to learn ways of engaging with technology that continues to prove that we have these critical thinking skills, as Meredith so aptly pointed out, and that they don't necessarily always have to be used in production, right? Like it can be the end product that you're analyzing and tightening and revamping instead of taking something from start to finish. And if you're anything like me, sometimes getting started is my hurdle. And so I'm looking at these software technologies as an opportunity to maybe get people out of their comfort zone, help them think or see a different way, because depending on how you write a prompt, your whole writing prompt could change just on a few words.
Well, you know, as y'all been talking, I kind of been pulling up some stats on Chat GPT usage to see if the GPT apocalypse is coming. And actually, this was the first month that worldwide usage dropped about 10% for Chat GPT. There's also a drop for Bing, and some of the other ones were, they have a lot less usage, so they weren't affected as much. I don't think that means that, the hype cycle's over and Chat GPT is done. I think it's settling into something mainstream. And from the limited research that I've seen, I think it has the potential to diminish the digital divide. In other words, I've seen it used in the workplace where those who could write didn't really need it, and those who struggled with it, with writing, benefited from it. So it was kind of closing that divide. Now, what do you do about paid versions versus, free versions and access? I mean, that's obviously a tricky wicket, and that will definitely increase the divide. As far as our students go, I'm hoping that what we see is writing with, rather than just a kind of complete abandonment of writing. When I use it, that's how I try to incorporate it into what I do on the few times that I've used it for anything serious. I think there's a lot of writing that we do that essentially follows a template. It's kind of low thought writing. And I see this as just continuation of automation, right? And also input devices, like when Katie was talking about writing in blue books, handwriting, right? And how we've switched now to like no one handwrites. In fact, they even stopped teaching cursive in the schools for a while. I think it may be coming back, but they had to teach type. I remember I felt like I was like one of the early wave of students being taught typing class, right? Now I was trying to teach my kids typing now, and they just want, oh, we know how to type. They're using their thumbs on their cell phone, right? But typing is an input device that didn't exist not too long ago. And it's in a way a kind of automation. Well, what if with AI we can just do like speech to text, no keyboards, no mice, eye recognition software, and just think about all of the occupational hazards, the physical therapy that won't be necessary anymore because we're constantly pointing and clicking and typing and holding our shoulders in a certain way, right? So I guess, I'm looking at the bright side of this technology and how we can live with it, and it can enable us and our students to perform. Not that they won't have to ever write again, because I do think that, thought to some extent requires language, and language is expressed through writing. And at the end of the day, it has to be translated into words somehow. But I think that the technology can help us do that more smoothly, not just by straight up writing stuff for us, but by making it easier for us to write. So yeah, again, I'm kind of hopeful about what this technology can do. Not necessarily ChatGPT, but the technology underlying it that allows it to string together rational thoughts in sentences and paragraphs that make sense. Yeah.
So so interesting, like the slight differences between the way that we see this stuff, when I know most of us on this call like agree on all of the baseline things, and then there are just slight differences within stuff. One of the things that scares me the absolute most about AI is not AI itself, it's how people use it, and fundamentally the course of humanity taking technology and using it for bad as well as good. So I think it's interesting that you're like, oh, things like co-writing and AI's ability to take things and make them into rational thought. I don't know that, to me, it's not making rational thought. We're seeing what it's doing as rational thought. And I always feel like that's such an important distinction to me, because it's putting out something from an algorithm. We see that as something rational. We read that as something rational. And then it's up to humanity, it's up to people to do with that as they will. And I worry about things like the digital divide. Of course, this could be something that brings people together, but what happens when we have AI coaches the way that we have SAT tutors who privileged, and we will, of course, privileged students, their high school, for example, has an AI specialist on hand, has someone who does prompt engineering, and not just that they have computer coding class and large language model data science class, which they will if they don't already at fancy high schools, but literally an AI coach who sits there and teaches you how to co-write, how to do those things, helps you with those skills that are going to then help you in college, which will then help you in business, and that kind of divide. So yes, I think that the technology in and of itself, if technology were agnostic, right, then we are in a place where the ability to use that technology could be for everyone. But I don't trust humans to use this technology to be for everyone, which I think it's interesting. Like, that's why I picked up on you saying like, oh, the rational thought of it. And I'm like, it's only as rational as the person reading it. Like, it's only as rational as, and that's not exactly what you meant, but it always pings that in my brain, where I'm like, we are still the ones with that ability to look at language and make critical thought. So even if it isn't thought to language, that's language to thought. And that's not a thing that the machine is giving us for now. The machine isn't the thing making the decision, doing the thing for now. We can talk about an AI future. But that's what I worry about when I say like I'm skeptical. It's people that I am skeptical of, not algorithms.
100%. I saw an article earlier this week in the New York Times that was talking about the bias that may exist within AI tools developed by certain subgroups. So like thinking about, women. So if it's a man generated AI that looks at, facial features or whatever, that representation when a woman uses it may not reflect what she sees in the mirror when she uses the same technology. And it's because the person who created it wasn't creating it from an experience that they knew authentically. And so I think that's part of the conversation too. So not only equity as far as like digital access, but equity when we think of who's creating this AI technology, how's it being used, and who's it supposed to be used by.